This podcast is brought to you by our friends at Honey Badger.
Your code is going to have errors, even code written by an amazing developer such as yourself. When bad things happen, it's nice to know that Honey Badger has your back. Honey Badger makes you a DevOps hero by combining error monitoring, uptime monitoring, and cron monitoring into a single, easy-to-use platform, saving you time and your cash. Remote Ruby listeners get 30% off for 6 months. Simply mention Remote Ruby when signing up and they'll apply the discount to your account. No credit card required.
This is Remote Ruby.
Have you any remote ideas to the meaning of the word?
What's up?
Welcome back, Jason.
Thanks. I feel like I haven't been here at all. I've been feeling guilty the past couple of weeks.
But you've been moving. You've been doing big things, big changes.
Yeah. We're moved in, about to go on vacation. So,
yeah, those are all good life things to do. So, I can't fault you for that. In fact, I want to be doing that. So I'm jealous. Yeah. That's what it is.
I was going to say that Chris and I will be here with our no lives, but we encourage you to have one.
I kind of miss programming. I'll probably do that on my vacation.
We're just going to live vicariously through you.
I'll send sweet pics of me looking at the beach from the inside.
There's water out there within walking distance.
My favorite time of the beach is 3 o'clock onward. The sun's finally not just setting the world on fire.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Man, that just brought me back. When I was in high school, we ended up going to Hawaii on a trip. My dad was like president of the Kiwanis Club. Every year they organize international meet for all the organizers. And the guy before my dad, he got to go to like Kansas City and Chicago. Nothing interesting. And my dad's was, his 2 cities he got to go to was Hawaii and then Rome was one of them. They moved Rome to Toronto. And the other guy before him was like, this is not fair at all. So, yeah, I remember flying in to Hawaii and it's like a 14-hour flight or something. So we get in at like 6 a.m. You're still awake because you didn't really sleep on the plane or whatever. And then you land and then you go to the beach and it's beautiful. I miss that. I'm going to go back. I feel like I've been stuck in the house for I don't know how many months, but it's all a blur now.
The thing I noticed most about moving is you can't buy anything because I guess since like people are I guess there's a lot of factors. Like one, things just got slowed down being made because people were at home. But that didn't stop people from continuing to buy a bunch of things, therefore depleting inventory. So like we had to start like ordering stuff like a month out of our move just to hope it would get here in time.
Yeah, the pipelines of stuff are all crazy. Because as we're like hoping to build this house, I saw Wes Boss tweeted about lumber's like 2 to 4 times more expensive now than it was pre-COVID because he's working on his little cottage thing. I was like, oh no, that is not a good sign for building a house right now. So yeah, I think a lot of those things are kind of in some serious flux right now. It's pretty crazy.
We went to IKEA to get some stuff and the guy just turned the computer around. He's like, this is our like shipment forecast for this item. And it was red all the way to December.
Oh no. Jeez.
And there's like nothing after it. Like it's not like it turns green or yellow. It's just like, we just don't know.
Oh man, that's crazy. It is a weird time. So are you trying to, deck out your office in any new or different ways than you had before?
I spent a grueling amount of time thinking about this, so much so that I took no action. In my office right now is literally set up the same way as my old one was. So much so, like there's a window to the left of my desk. And like the first few days, I like still kept thinking. Like I was so in the zone, I would like be shocked when I looked up and realized like, oh, I'm at a different place. So,
yeah, when you signed on Zoom, I was like, this looks awfully the same size of room. And I at first thought you were still at your old place, but the windows are different, the doors.
Yeah, and the way like I noticed in the like camera, like my little like thumbnail of me, the floor looks like carpet, but it's actually just like a really light hardwood. So it literally does just look like my last office.
Yeah, at first I was like, wait, there's supposed to be something different here, but it doesn't at a first glance.
Yeah, I have some ideas, but I don't know. I took off Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday when we moved, the week we moved in. And Thursday morning, I came in my office and I was like, what do I need to work? It's like a computer. I haven't even set up my computer yet. So,
yeah, when we moved, I didn't set up my desktop for a month or something and tried to work from my laptop. And I didn't realize how much more productive I was on my desktop, having two big monitors and, you know, being able to see a lot more code and browsers and everything at the same time. And I don't know, just a mechanical keyboard and everything. I'm a million times more productive, but I noticed like a frustration building in me and I couldn't really put my finger on it. And then I set up the computer and I was like, oh yeah, that's why, because everything is harder on a laptop.
yes. Yeah, I mentioned it before, like I have like a baseline MacBook Air and like firing up a huge Rails app is possible, but not enjoyable. So I just wasn't even going to try.
So did DHH lie to us about using the MacBook Air as a, you know, reasonable dev machine?
Maybe. He probably has 55 tricks that make it not a problem. Maybe I just don't know how to do Rails.
Maybe being DHH, he's got the sickest MacBook Air.
Right. Yes,
like
it's
a
fine.
$10,000 one.
It has 12 cores. No one else has this.
Yeah, it's their internal beta version.
Yeah.
What's been going on?
So I spent some time this morning. This is not Rails or Ruby related at all, but it's cool as hell. Are you caught up on things coming in Laravel 8?
Not really, no. I saw a few tweets, but nothing specific.
Okay, so you know the thing I always talk about, I wish I had in Rails and Laravel is like auth scaffolding, right?
Yeah.
So Laravel has auth scaffolding to the point where it like puts a nav bar in, gives you like sign out, sign in links, all the things. Laravel 8 comes with a package called Jetstream.
I did see this.
And it's basically Spark, which is their SaaS template without billing. So it comes with not only auth, it's all written in Tailwind UI, and it comes with a profile page. The user can change their avatar, name, email, password. It has two-factor auth built in. It has, what else was it? It'll track where you're logged in at and let you force log everyone out.
Wow.
And then also it supports Teams.
Whoa.
So it's literally Spark without billing. And it's open source. So like you just run a command and it comes in two variants. We had Jonathan Rink on the show talking about Alpine JS a while back. It has an Alpine version that's Alpine in Vue, or you can run a command and install, not Alpine, Inertia. There's an Inertia version with Vue, and there's an Alpine version with Livewire, which is like their Stimulus Reflex.
Oh, man. That's
so
awesome.
You get to choose between server rendered views or view components. And that's the other thing. Every card that they've made is a blade component, which is like a view component, like a Rails view component. And so like you just literally can go in and edit them. You can reuse them. And by doing that, they've also made all the buttons components. So you have access to like pre-styled Tailwind buttons and stuff just out of the box.
Did you say it was on using Tailwind UI?
Yeah. So there's a few components that are free and it's using those. And I guess he's worked with Adam to get a couple of maybe the paid ones.
Wow. Another thing that I'm like, I'm just jealous.
I was sitting here this morning. I got up kind of early. And so I remembered that I had bought a RailsConf ticket because it was online and it was last week. And so I went and watched that keynote, or maybe it was this week. I don't know. It was sometime. And it was cool. It was really cool.
Oh, that is pretty epic. it's impressive that it supports teams and all those things. I feel like Rails would, if someone on the core team wanted to, Rails would add it, or it would be able to be added, So I don't know. Maybe I just need to get on the Rails core team.
Simple enough.
Yeah. I like that stuff a lot. It's just things that you don't have to use it, but it is something that so many people need that it's nice to ship it with the framework. And that's the fundamental philosophy difference, I think, is Rails is stuff extracted from Basecamp and Shopify and GitHub or whatever. Whereas they treat Laravel like a product and they're building what people are asking for. And, they end up building a totally different thing, which is cool. I wish that we had a lot more of that stuff, but we can communicate, as a community, go and try and build as much as that as we can. It's just helpful when the core team supports it. You get a level of quality that you can't always trust with, third-party gems, which is...
I think that's the big thing for me about all the Laravel stuff is Taylor wrote, it's an open source project, but he wrote and is very active and involved in that framework. And so when stuff like that comes out, it is his brainchild. For example, so Laravel models, they don't live in a models directory, or they used to not. They live just in the app namespace. And so I guess a lot of people really want app models. So he opened a, Laravel 8 will by default use app models namespace now. But he wrote all his generators, he rewrote all the generators to know if you have a models directory or not. So if you say their Rails console is artisan, model make, user, and there's not a models directory, it puts it in the app directory. If there is a models directory, it puts it in there. And it's just that little attention to detail.
It makes a big difference. Yeah. Instead of an error message and the command just stops, just check and see what the defaults should be and use them. I really like that. And those are things that running your Rails app and then, you haven't run migrations, we'll give you an error and tell you exactly what to do, but no way to automate that. And then thankfully what was it called? The interactable errors or whatever it was called?
Better errors.
No, better errors of the debugging library. There's actionable errors. That's a thing that was added to Rails that adds that button.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the class or whatever. Those are quality of life improvements that I wish we had more of.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I know it's not Rails related at all, but I watched it this morning and I was just drooling because that's really cool. Yep, just my usual FOMO.
Yeah, I don't know. Looking at all the other frameworks and things as inspiration and, getting ideas on what could be better about the tools you use, I think is really valuable. So yeah, I love that. I think we'll get a lot more of that in Rails, but we need to get some more people building stuff like that. We will get there, but it's going to take a community effort. They have a pretty awesome team at Laravel just cranking away, and it's growing to be. I like that Taylor would take people and add them to the Laravel team and give them responsibilities. David Hemphill works on Nova, and he's got now people working on Forge, a couple people I think, and each one kind of gets their dedicated team members, and the whole ecosystem ends up getting massive improvements.
Yeah, there's somebody that works on Spark. Oh, so they dropped Braintree support.
Yeah, and they added Paddle.
Yeah, and so the new version of Spark, which he just shows an early access of, is basically instead of having billing be part of the profile section or a settings page, he's re-emulated the Stripe billing portal. And so if you hit /billing, it looks almost like Stripes. And then if it's Paddle, you've got the buttons and you click it and it opens the Paddle pop-ups right there. And then when you're done, you just return to the site.
Ooh, that sounds pretty cool. I think that seems like a better way of managing things where they can kind of control the views. Whereas pay and, cashier used to be the same thing of render these partials or like, here's your models, go render them yourself. Most users don't want to have to deal with that and all the nuances of it, where there's like someone can be on a generic trial, but they can also be on a trial for a specific plan. And it's easy to like make mistakes in your logic there. So it's nice if you have the views already pre-made for you and it's just a page you link to. It's probably a good improvement to make to pay. I think having looked at someone opened a PR for paddle support and pay a couple months ago, I think July maybe. So it's been a while. I haven't had time to review it yet, unfortunately. And it makes me feel bad when I'm like 2 months behind on a PR like that. But it's like a big thing and I'm going to have to support it, right? That person contribute this massive thing like paddle, but then I'm going to have to deal with bug reports and whatever. So yeah, that might be coming to pay at some point, which would be cool. But there's little things that I got to redo. And I don't like the module architecture. Now that I rewrote the notification stuff is more Railsy, like instantiating a class that does all the processing and whatever. I think it needs a massive refactoring internally to be a lot cleaner and just use modules and classes and metaprogramming and just better architecture on a Ruby level rather than adding all these methods and then kind of using the method name and saying like Stripe subscription, Braintree subscription as method names.
I remember all that.
It's easy to make conflicting method names on accident, just putting them in modules that get included. So that'll be something we can improve in the future, but it is a complicated beast when Paddle doesn't allow you to like create a customer directly through the API and things.
It's all, I think, like their iframe stuff.
Which it makes sense where they can control a lot more of that and make it easier for you. But at the same time, nothing is consistent. So how in the hell do we build a library that's going to try and make them consistent? It's just not going to be possible. So it feels like a well-intentioned library that we're trying to create, but one that may end up being an inordinate amount of work and not as good a payout as I would hope it to be.
One thing that he mentioned, like when he showed just like a little quick preview of Paddle, is that I guess you can do PayPal through Paddle.
Oh.
Yeah, so there is actually like pay by card or pay by PayPal in the Paddle overlay.
Okay. And that was like the value of Braintree. You can do the same thing there, but Braintree's API is just horrendous. They don't have webhooks for half the things you need or want, and got to calculate prorations yourself. And it's easy to make a lot of mistakes and just waste time with it. So I'm going to go check out Paddle. I know Paddle seems to be cropping up as a thing that people are using way more all of a sudden. Because Stripe has gotten complicated. I
know several people use it for the way it handles VAT. So like I read a few developers in the EU who are just like, I just use this. It's what I want to use. Pretty well-known developers too. Yeah, I've heard the same thing. I think that is usually the reason why people are moving towards it, because it's kind of up to you to figure out with Stripe. But I think they're working towards improving that. But right now, if you want to use something, Paddle's the way to go. You're trying to deal with VAT and tax stuff. Seems easier. Taxes are a nasty, nasty thing. Yeah. We do VAT at Podia, but we use like a third-party system for like getting rates and things like that. Yeah, it makes sense. Because there's a lot of zip code level things that, matter, and all the rules are so different. I wanted to mention, did you see this is like from April, I guess, but Ruby has experimental support for Rightward assignments. I saw it this morning in Ruby Weekly, and I didn't read it until right before this. Yeah. For anybody that isn't familiar with it, you know how you normally say x equals 3 and the variable's on the left side,
the proposal or like experimental feature is that you can do 3 with a fat arrow, like an equals greater than, and the variable on the right side. And I don't know what to think about that. I don't see any value to it really. Like, it doesn't add anything. It's just new syntax. And it looks like it'll just confuse people because it's kind of like hash syntax with strings, but it's an interesting proposal. And I haven't seen too many examples here that are like, oh, that would be really useful. I don't have that reaction to most of these. It just seems like it's going to add confusion. But I was curious what you guys thought about that.
Like, you seem to have like a very, like, even when we were talking about it pre-call, you're having like a negative reaction to it. I definitely am not put off by it anyway. I think it's kind of cool. But as far as use cases, I don't know, something like if you just have a bunch of constants maybe that come in and you maybe want to filter them into variables conditionally, maybe that would help. I don't know. At the end of the day, I don't know.
Yeah, my hesitation on it is it's not going to be clear, or maybe you make mistakes with it accidentally, but it looks like the intention is to kind of make it where you can do things that are more chainable almost, where like you're chaining method calls with the return value. You could do something like this by using that arrow to assign a variable on the right side and then work off of that, I guess. So that seems interesting. I still feel like it doesn't, no other language that I know or usually write has anything like that. So it seems a little different. But I don't know. I'm kind of curious to see what happens with it. Doesn't look like there's been much activity for 4 months though. So who knows what will happen with that.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that a lot of features we see, we kind of hear, oh, that was in Perl or, this or that. But this is actually from R. This is something that they're very big into that over there, apparently.
I mean, when you read some of the code, you take an array and you grab 2 items out of the array and you use the arrow to assign it. It feels more readable as a human, where you're like, pull these things out into an array and the results are on the right side instead of the left. That does feel normal to read, I guess, is just a English writer or whatever. But yeah, that's interesting. It comes from R. I don't think I've ever written any R. And yeah, Perl was kind of, my first job out of college was doing Perl after I'd done Ruby. And Ruby was heavily influenced by Perl. So I felt like I was stepping back in time, like 10 years or 20 years doing Perl. And it was the worst thing ever. I hated it.
Yeah, there's like, I'm not even going to explain it. I'm going to put a link in the show notes, but there's some computer science mathematical thing that this is really is kind of addressing, I believe. And it's like operator associativity. I remember being in like discrete math or something, and like all this, I saw like an equation on this Wikipedia page and it all kind of clicked. I was like, okay, I've seen this before. So it could definitely be related to maybe more numerical. It's probably like to add like increased ability for Ruby to deal with like numerical and scientific equations and stuff like that.
That would be great. That's one of those things that like, Python gets all the machine learning and scientific community stuff. And if we can get more of that in Ruby, that would be amazing. Let's face it, your code is going to have errors, even code written by an amazing developer such as yourself. When bad things happen, it's nice to know that Honeybadger has your back. Honeybadger makes you a DevOps hero by combining error monitoring, uptime monitoring, and cron monitoring into a single, easy-to-use platform, saving you time and your cash. Honeybadger monitors and sends error alerts in real time with all the context needed to see what's causing the error and where it's hiding in your code so you can quickly fix it and get on with your day. The included uptime and cron monitoring also lets you know when your external services are having issues or your background jobs go AWOL or silently fail. Go to honeybadger.io and discover how Star, Josh, and Ben created a 100% bootstrapped monitoring solution. Why is this important? Self-funding means they only answer to you, the developer, rather than a venture capital overlord. Remote Ruby listeners get 30% off for 6 months. Simply mention Remote Ruby when signing up and they'll apply the discount to your account. No credit card required. What else have you guys been up to this week?
I think I talked to you, Chris, a little bit about this, but I have been watching GitHub. GitHub is taking their primer. I guess it's a component system. It's not really, it's a design system. That's the word I'm looking for. Their primer design system, which is currently implemented in just plain HTML, CSS. They also have a React library for it. And they are basically, from what I can see, re-implementing their React library with Vue component. So it was great to see because they answered a lot of the questions I think we've all been kind of asking, like how are they using these Vue components and what's the best practice and like how are you leveraging this? And I think those answers are kind of out there now. And the other thing is it's still early on. And I basically cloned the repo at a point where I was like, okay, this is what I need to take and I can build on it. So I've been basically taking their approach and their patterns and implementing it with Tailwind. So at first I tried to go overboard like usual, and then I scaled it back way back. So now I'm primarily working on the engine that you can basically build your components on top of. So think of like your Tailwind classes. If you have, I don't know, like margin top 4 and padding bottom 4 and so on and so forth, you can basically create what I'm calling and what GitHub also called a base component and make your other components inherit from that. And that base component has the ability to basically accept any Tailwind-like argument, not all of them right now, but you can take a lot of them. So now you could build your components like box component in your view, box component PT:4, comma, MT:5, and basically create more composable components on top of that. Because one thing that Joe kind of said when he was talking to us about this is that they have found a lot of success by building bigger components out of smaller components. And I like that a lot. So I was trying to go too big, but now I've kind of centered back a little bit. And now I'm just trying to build the small components because then anyone else can come along and easily compose their main components. So whenever and if I ship this thing, I mean, it works right now. It's just not done, but I might include like maybe a few very basic components, but I don't really see a major point almost at this point, because as long as you have a base component, then everyone's going to want to override your components, I feel like. So I think I'm just going to make this the base layer, and then maybe I'll make another library that basically adds my own styling to like create buttons and forms and actions and alerts and stuff like that composed from this library, if that kind of makes a little sense.
That's really cool, because that's one of the things, sorry, I keep going back to this, but when I was watching, they were talking about like building components in that video I watched this morning, and they used a base button component. And then for any variant they want of that, they just make another danger button component that is really just like calling that base one. And it's like really extendable. So I think that's really fascinating, because I have not written components like that. And I want to learn how to not suck at writing components.
Okay, I've basically just been reading React component libraries recently. Well, not just recently, I've been doing it for a while. And that is a very big concept in there. And Jules said that they were basically taking a lot of lessons from the React community when they were building Vue components. So yeah, that's from there. And the nice thing is that I had always struggled, and I absolutely love this feature in React where you can create responsive props, is what they refer to it as, where if I have a margin top, you can basically give it an array, and at each index of the array is like mapped to your responsive breakpoints. So like nothing, small, medium, large, extra large, if you're talking about Tailwind. And then you can basically pass the component an array. So like for margin top, I would give it an array and say maybe 4 and then comma. And then I don't want anything at small or medium. Let's say at large, I want it to be like 8. So you just pass an array. It would be 4 and then nil or blank string for the next 2 attributes and then 8. And then you don't have to keep adding them. So even though there is an extra large and a large, you can just stop there. So that's something I'm really excited about. Also, they got Storybook mostly working. The one thing is it doesn't really work well with Webpacker unless you do this super hacky thing that I did to grab Webpack's pack files off of a different port using some Webpacker command foo and calculating that pack SHA hash, whatever they call it, where you get that random string at the end of your pack files. It's able to basically compute that. So then you can basically just interpolate the name of the pack and style sheet tags into Storybook. And Storybook runs on port 5,000 or 9,000, whatever it is. I'm sure you can configure it, but it's not running on the same port as Webpacker. So what I've seen a lot of people do is either A, they're sourcing things out of sprockets, I believe, but what Vue component is doing is just taking the CDN of their CSS style sheets, and that's all they're using. So for right now, on the thing I'm working on, I just put the Tailwind CDN path or script tag, and that will basically make Storybook work. But if you want to get more fine grained with it, you can interpolate your Webpacker pack and style sheet tags into a specific layout file just for Storybook, which is what people seem to be kind of standardizing around. So that's been pretty cool to see that start working finally.
Yeah, I'm really interested in having Storybook for Vue components. It's like my dream because I know you can preview components, but I don't know. I like the Storybook UX a lot and the concept behind it.
Yeah, apparently I listened to another podcast and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. And if I remember, I'll stick it in the show notes. But one of the folks who works on Storybook, who is a former Rails developer, kind of briefly touched on Rails support for it. In prior to version 6 of Storybook, it was not possible. And there's a gentleman named John Palmer who is very active on the Vue component side. And he basically came to Storybook and was like, from what I understand, what needs to happen so that we can do this with Rails? And they kind of told him, and he basically built it. And now it's in the 6.0 release that I think just came out of beta. I think now it's live. So it's definitely the Storybook and Vue component. If you want to make it work in your Rails app, you definitely can right now. And with the toggles and the actions, and let's say I want to give my button a different variant, which is something I was doing while testing out what I've got going on. I created like a few variants for my buttons, and you can just toggle them in the Storybook UI and just see it right there. And as well as change the text, and it's pretty cool. But other than that, I started using RubyMine at work a little bit. That's been quite an adventure, and I didn't think I would ever go back to RubyMine, although it always, was like, okay, I know there's like a power tool out there if I ever need a power tool, but I don't need a power tool because I'm so great and so smart and such a great developer. But then all of a sudden that changed. So now I'm like, okay, wait, I need someone to help me and hold my hand a little bit because I need a hand holder. And I gave RubyMine another shot because Eric is also trying it and he hyped me up on the idea. So I watched a few old RailsConf talks and several tutorials on it. And I was like, oh my God, okay, I get it now. And it just kind of clicked. So I've been using RubyMine for the past couple of days now. And it has definitely been a major help when working in this legacy app.
So what made you want to make that switch? Because you were using VS Code before, right?
Yes. Because in VS Code, if I know how to get around and I know what's what and what's where, I can do that very quickly and easily in VS Code. But in a project where I don't know where anything is, and the models are large and this and that. Like RubyMine provides a ton of tools to make all that easier. Just you can toggle a pane to just see every method, and there's a ton of really, really nice shortcuts. There's also commands to basically do a big code inspection across your project. And that turned up a lot of really interesting results. And the first one I acted on immediately was there were a few hashes, mostly in the test, but there was one or two that had duplicated keys. So RubyMine was able to tell me that, and I was able to go fix it. And there's a couple of other really nice things. The interactive debugger, especially for the tests, has been so nice because I'm always in Pry. I'm like, okay, what do I have available to me? And then, I have to remember those methods. I'm like, is it public methods or instance methods or whatever? And then I eventually, but I don't really get anywhere. It's not as helpful versus in RubyMine where they're like, oh, here's all your variables right here, and you can click into them and this and that. So it's cool. So if RubyMine wants to sponsor this podcast, I'd be happy to talk about it more. You can reach me at Jason Charnes at, I don't know your email, but whatever Jason's email is.
Just email that one.
Jason at charnes.com. I don't know.
It's close. I've always wanted to use RubyMine. I go through this phase where I download it. I'm like, hell yeah, we're going to do this. And then 10 minutes later, I'm like, what am I doing? And I run back to my editor.
I did too, but I did that actually 2 or 3 days in a row. I was like, okay, I need help. I think RubyMine will help me. 5 minutes into using RubyMine, I'm like, okay, I can't do this. Go straight back to VS Code. I did that 2 or 3 times. And then one day I was like, okay, the problem is that I don't know what's in RubyMine and I don't know the keyboard commands. So luckily I've been to some RailsConf talks or some RailsConfs, and I actually have a RubyMine keyboard shortcut pamphlet. So I was able to pull that out. So that now is like a trifold that sits on my desk. That's super helpful. And then I watched a few videos on YouTube. And after maybe an hour's worth of YouTube, and I wasn't even doing anything anyway, I was basically making dinner and just kind of relaxing after work. An hour and a half after straight YouTube, I literally got back on my computer and I was like, okay, I get it now. I want to see if this really works like this. And it's very powerful if you kind of take some time and dedicate some time to learning it. They also have some great stuff built into the editor to help you learn it. I really wanted this in VS Code, where if I keep clicking on something that there's a keyboard command for, it tells me what that command is. So it's, hey, you pressed on the terminal tab 4 times. The command to do that is Command X or whatever it is. So I think I would love that in VS Code. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. So I didn't expect to. And I was kind of the person that was like, oh, I don't need an editor. I always kind of envisioned myself one day being trapped in Vim. But no, I've swung back the other direction.
Have you used it on any of your non-work projects?
I have. It is much more cumbersome at that point.
Yeah, that's
it's a little bit slower, but if I know the domain and I know and it's a small app and I can just kind of skip around. I'm not at a proficiency with RubyMine yet where I can be at the same speed. I'm definitely way faster navigating around in VS Code, but RubyMine gives me all the context and the helpers that I need for when I don't have that context. And that's super helpful.
Yeah. that's one of the things that's always kind of kept me from moving to it, is that it always looks like it has really cool features for Rails, but I also write code that's not Ruby. And I know it has some of the JavaScript features. But if I fire up a PHP project, do I have to go to PHP Storm or VS Code? And that's the nice thing about using one of those just text editors is I have plugins for all that stuff, but the main editor I use is always the same.
Yeah. I mean, as long as they're offering other products that you also have to pay for in other languages, there's not an incentive to make working in PHP nice in RubyMine. I mean, specifically because it's called RubyMine and that's the point. But
right. I guess that's the thing is I just like the one editor approach.
Yeah.
I don't have to download 2 different applications because
I totally agree.
So
the keyboard commands I find very, very awkward as well. So there is a VS Code extension. I just was like, I'll try it for a little bit longer and see if I can do it. But I'm going to either have to start tweaking them myself or try that out. But the keyboard commands are definitely wonky. I will say that. But yes, you're right. I don't know. I may just use this at work and I may just create the keyboard commands that I need. But at work specifically, it's helping a lot. So,
no, I applaud you for using it because I've always wanted to. And now I have somebody I can ask all my questions to. So,
well, I've always known Brittany Martin to be the person who is using RubyMine. Like, if you were just to ask me. And so, I think the fact that she had at some point said it to me was the only real reason I even gave it another thought, because I was like, oh, what if I try RubyMine? I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. That's a waste of time and money, et cetera, et cetera. But then I was like, well, Brittany really likes it. Like, she really likes it. And I was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to give it a try, because if she really likes it, then I trust that Brittany's got I trust that her workflow is very good because she's such a good developer. So I was like, I'm going to give this a try, see what happens. And I am on the RubyMine side now at minimum for work. So it's a hammer. If you need a hammer, and I needed a hammer. So there's a time and a place.
I always felt like coming from, in school, we used Visual Studio building, C++ and whatever apps. And having a nice debugger that shows you, here's all the variables and all of their values and what types they are and everything, that can be really eye-opening. At a certain point, you may not need that or whatever, but when you're getting used to some code that you've never seen before, that style of debugger, more than just like a, bybug or pry or whatever, those are helpful, but being able to see and inspect everything is a whole other level that really makes you understand what's happening in this state, in the system. So that stuff I always feel like I miss out on using Vim, but at the same time, I feel like it also forces me to figure it out too, because I have to do it the hard way,
That's stuff I feel like I miss out on using Ruby.
Yeah.
I'll say that. Don't hurt me like that.
I mean, I love Ruby.
Don't just come back and hurt me like that, Jason.
I love Ruby, but I don't know. I've always been intrigued by the other side of
I will say, you guys have convinced me. If Rails ever goes downhill for me and Laravel is still around, I'm not doing JavaScript. I made that decision. I'll go write PHP.
PHP's got some pretty good tooling, but because they've introduced some concepts of types and stuff like that. Laravel does really cool things with type hinting, but I don't know. I would even be interested to try a strongly typed language, not for the safety that people talk about, but only for the development tools, because there's so much cool things that an editor can do with static analysis and things like that.
Yeah. Man, that is a complicated subject, I feel like, because there's this, explicitness that you have to have in those languages. And working on this Ruby course that I'm doing, the whole reason I love Ruby is that it gets out of your way, and that, you're writing code just purely in the context of whatever domain you're on. If you're working in your Rails routes file, you only really care about whatever the Rails routes functionality is, and you don't even know where those methods come from. You don't care. Once you understand them and know what's available to you, then all that falls to the wayside. Makes learning this stuff in the first place a lot harder. But yeah, sometimes I wish I had that, the explicit everything. I know what types everything is. And yet at the other end of the spectrum, I know that writing software is more about communicating this idea to other people, myself in the future, teammates, whatever, and hopefully the computer can understand it and run it. That's the real goal for me long term, not so much writing code to make the computer understand it. So if you do that, you lose some of that analysis and whatever that you can get from tools, but I think you also gain some stuff that's hard to make tangible.
Yeah, I mostly just want the laziness part of it, but that comes at the cost of more explicitness, which I guess probably balances out. Like I look at like C# and like in the .NET world and all the like refactorings you can do by like clicking a button. That kind of stuff's cool, but this is all spoken at ignorance too. The only like strongly typed language I've ever worked in is Java, and I never worked in it. I learned in it. So
yeah, I have a friend that does that, and he's got ReSharper or whatever, that tool for refactoring things. And yeah, I mean, he talks about being able to click a button and refactor stuff, but I'm like, how do you know that was a good refactor? Like, it's maybe a cleaner version, and you can get by writing the crappy stuff. But then I'm like, isn't there a whole level of this where it's like, it can't refactor concepts? It can only do rudimentary refactoring, kind of like what standard RB does, where we're going to clean up your syntax and make it simpler, cleaner.
Standard RB did solve a lot of my frustrations because I started using, it doesn't do necessarily like refactoring, but like I started using Prettier, and like knowing that when I hit save in VS Code that like my JavaScript is always going to conform to the same style. Having that in Ruby was like, I'm good. I'm content again. Like,
yeah, I added it to Jumpstart, and I'm very happy I did. It like, pulling PRs and adding it to any open source projects, that all the PRs are going to be well formatted because they're not going to pass the standard RB check. And you don't have to even worry about those PRs that people submit that don't conform to it. That makes it a lot easier to focus on what is the actual content of the code, how does it do what it does, and that stuff makes a big difference. Yeah, just getting rid of the little nitpicky formatting things that you're like, I don't want tabs, I want spaces, and I want you to use, do end instead of curly braces here, or whatever it might be. You don't have those arguments, or you don't even think about it anymore.
Yeah, I guess that's why it kind of goes back to why I'm intrigued by the other tooling around more static languages is I just want to think about less stuff and worry about what I'm writing. And like JavaScript, that's why Prettier was cool to me is you can leave off a semicolon and everything's fine in JavaScript. But the thing that sucks is if you're inconsistent about it, which I am, because I'm typing really quickly, I'm not thinking, is this the end of a line? And so just being able to save that and it either add them all or remove them all, that's just one less thing I have to think about, one less thing a code reviewer has to think about. I'm down with that.
Yeah, it lets you write code the way you want to write it, and then it will format it for you. And I think that's what I like about it all so much. And also, how have you guys been talking about the static languages, and you've yet to bring up TypeScript?
I don't know. I've never really used TypeScript, to be honest. I used it on a Ionic project, but that's all I've ever used it on.
I think TypeScript is kind of winning, honestly. I slowly but surely, I've heard people in the JavaScript community say that this is happening, but I'm also starting to see it's becoming more and more like when I'm viewing like trending projects on GitHub, they're not in JavaScript anymore. They're in TypeScript. And I kind of enjoy it. It can be a major pain in the butt, especially if you already don't really know how to write JavaScript. But if you already aren't really good at writing JavaScript, it's really helpful because it'll help teach you and help stop you from screwing things up. So I like TypeScript. I don't really foresee myself ever using it in a Rails app because I have already tried to like use some of the Rails JavaScript tools and none of them have any types and there's not really much community support for it at all. So that was a huge pain. But whenever I was working on a library the other day and I was going to ship it with an NPM package and I wrote that in TypeScript, like without even really considering it.
Well, anything else y'all want to dish about before we wrap up?
Oh, nothing I can think of. I guess you'll be out next week. So
I'll be big beaching.
Yeah, well, enjoy. We'll be sitting here at our computers as always.
At the beach.
I didn't say I wouldn't be at my computer.
We're going to change our Zoom backgrounds to the beach and try and pretend we're there with you.
Well, good to be back. Sad to be gone again. Hope to be back again soon.
All right, man. We'll catch you guys later.
Yeah.
See you guys.